My name is Sarah Tate and I'm 25 years old. 5 years ago, I stood outside my parents' house in Fargo, North Dakota, shivering as snow fell around me, their words cutting deeper than the biting wind. Don't come back here ever again. They said, their voices cold, final. I was 20 in love with a guy they despised. And that night, I walked away, my boots crunching through the snow. My heart pounding with betrayal. They thought I'd fail, that I'd crawl back begging. But I didn't. That night changed everything. Pushed me into a storm, literally and figuratively, where I had to fight to survive. Their rejection was just the start. Lies, heartbreak, and a moment in that blizzard nearly broke me. But I kept going. 5 years later. They wished they hadn't said those words. Stick around to hear how I turned their dismissal into my strength, and how they paid the price for pushing me away. If you've ever been betrayed by family, drop a comment below and share your story. Hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey. Growing up in Fargo, North Dakota, I always felt like I was living in my sister Teresa's shadow. My parents, Patricia Neal and Harold Neal, ran our middle-class household like a showcase for their ambitions. Mom, with her sharp tongue and endless lists of expectations, wanted me to chase a degree from a prestigious university and marry someone who'd fit her vision of success. A doctor, a lawyer, someone with a title. Dad, quieter, but just as firm, backed her up, his nod signaling agreement. Their dream was clear. A daughter who'd make them proud at neighborhood gatherings, someone to boast about at church. But I wasn't that daughter. I was Sarah, the one who didn't fit their mold. My sister Teresa Porter was their pride and joy. At 30 she had a law degree, a corner office at a local firm, and a fiancé who checked every box on Mom's list. Teresa's got her head on straight. Mom would say, her voice warm with approval, while I sat across the table, 18 and invisible. Teresa's achievements hung over me like a weight. Every A- I brought home was met with, "Your sister never settled for less than perfect." I'd clench my jaw, staring at my plate, wishing I could disappear. Dad would chime in, "You need to focus." Sarah. As if I wasn't trying, their words carved a hollow space inside me, a constant reminder that I'd never be enough. High school was my rebellion. I'd slip out to local hangouts, cafes, record stores, anywhere I could breathe without their judgment. That's where I met David Reed. He was 25, a mechanic with calloused hands, and a quiet confidence that drew me in. David worked at an auto shop on the edge of town, fixing engines and talking about his dream of running his own business. He wasn't the kind of guy Mom and Dad pictured for me. No college degree, no polished manners, but he made me feel alive. We'd sit in his truck parked by the Red River, sharing stories about our lives. With David, I wasn't competing with Teresa. I was just me. When I told Mom about David, her face turned to stone. "A mechanic," she said, her voice slicing through the air. "You're meant for better than that." Dad didn't say much, but his frown spoke volumes. They dragged me to dinners with Teresa and her fiancé, pointing out how secure her life was, how I should aim for that. I tried to defend David, explaining he had plans, ambition. But Mom cut me off. "He's beneath you." She snapped, her eyes cold. I felt my face burn, my voice rising as I argued back, but it was pointless. They saw David as a mistake, a detour from their perfect plan for me. Teresa tried to play peacemaker, but it never went far. "They just want what's best," she'd say in private, her tone soft but distant. She'd spent years earning their approval, and I could see she didn't want to risk it. I was on my own, torn between their expectations and what I felt with David. He became my refuge. We'd meet after my shifts at a downtown diner, talking late into the night, dreaming of a life free from their rules. I started staying out longer, dodging Mom's lectures, ignoring Dad's disappointed sighs. The more time I spent with David, the more I pulled away from home. But the tension kept building. One evening, I caught Mom and Dad whispering in the living room. "She's throwing her future away." Mom said, her voice low and sharp, "That boy's trouble." Dad murmured something about discipline, his words too soft to catch. I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding, feeling like a stranger in my own home. They didn't trust me, didn't see me as anything but a disappointment. By 20, I was done trying to please them. I wanted a life that was mine with David, away from their constant criticism. I didn't realize how soon that choice would spark a confrontation that would change everything. Loving David was the first time I dared to live for myself, but my family wouldn't accept it. By 20, I was done fighting to fit into Mom and Dad's vision of who I should be. David, with his easy smile and dreams of owning an auto shop, felt like my way out. I started spending nights at his small apartment, a cramped place above the garage where he worked. It wasn't much faded walls, a lumpy couch, but it felt like freedom. I'd pack a bag, tell Mom I was studying late, and slip out to be with him. Each time I left, I could feel her disapproval burning through the phone calls I ignored. Dad's silence was just as heavy, his sighs louder than words. Teresa knew something was up. "You're playing with fire, Sarah," she warned one afternoon, her voice low as we sat in her car. She'd caught me sneaking back home at dawn, my hair still messy from a night with David. I shrugged her off, tired of her half-hearted advice. She wouldn't stand up to Mom and Dad. So what did she know I was done hiding? One weekend, I made up my mind. I stuffed a duffel bag with clothes, my favorite books, and a few photos, and told David I was moving in. His eyes lit up, and for a moment, I believed we could build something real away from my family's rules. But secrets don't stay buried in Fargo. A neighbor, someone Mom knew from her book club, saw me carrying boxes into David's place. By dinner that night, the air in our house was thick with tension. Mom stood at the kitchen counter, her knuckles white as she gripped a dish towel. "You're living with that mechanic." She spat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I froze my fork halfway to my mouth. Dad sat across from me, his face hard, no longer the soft-spoken man who'd once ruffled my hair. "Sarah, is this true?" he asked, his tone low, but heavy with accusation. I nodded, my heart racing. There was no point lying anymore. The argument exploded from there. Mom's voice rose, each word a jab. "You're throwing your life away." "He's nothing, Sarah." "Nothing." I pushed back, my own voice shaking. "He's more than you think. You don't even know him." Dad slammed his hand on the table, startling us both. "Enough," he said. "You're embarrassing us." I stared at him, hurt slicing through me, embarrassing them. That's what this was about. Their reputation, not my happiness. Teresa sat silently, her eyes fixed on her plate, offering no help. I felt cornered like a stranger in the home I'd grown up in. It was late, the wind howling outside when the fight reached its breaking point. Snow had started falling thick and relentless, piling up against the windows. Mom pointed at the door, her face twisted with anger. "If you choose him, you're done here. Don't ever come back." She said, her words cold and final. Dad stood behind her, his jaw tight, not saying a word to stop her. I waited for him to speak to soften her rage, but he didn't. My chest ached, a mix of fury and betrayal. "Fine," I said, my voice barely steady. "I don't need you." I grabbed my duffel bag, still packed from earlier, and stormed to my room for my coat. Teresa followed me, whispering, "Sarah, just apologize. They'll calm down." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "They don't want me, Teresa. They want someone I'm not." She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. I couldn't stay. Not after those words. I walked out the front door, the cold hitting me like a slap. Snow swirled around me, clinging to my hair, my boots sinking into the fresh drifts. I stood on the porch for a moment, staring back at the house, its warm lights mocking me. The loneliness was crushing heavier than the storm. I turned and started walking, my bag slung over my shoulder toward David's apartment, not knowing what came next. Living with David in his small apartment, I thought I'd found happiness until everything fell apart. After walking away from my parents' house, I settled into David's place above the auto shop. It was a tiny space, creaky floors, a single window overlooking the street, but it was ours. I felt lighter, free from Mom and Dad's constant judgment. David would come home smelling of motor oil, his grin chasing away the ache of that night I left. We'd cook cheap dinners, laugh over burnt toast, and talk about a future where he'd run his own garage. For the first time, I believed I could build a life on my terms. To make ends meet, I took a part-time job at a corner store in Fargo, stocking shelves and ringing up customers. The pay wasn't much, but I squirreled away every dollar, dreaming of a bigger place for us. David worked long hours at the shop, often staying late to fix extra cars. "It's for our future," he'd say, kissing my forehead before heading out. I trusted him, believed in the life we were piecing together. My sister Teresa called once, her voice hesitant, asking if I was okay. I'm fine, I told her, cutting the conversation short. I didn't need her pity or mom's lectures. I had David, and that was enough. 3 months in, cracks started to show. David began staying out later, checking his phone more than usual. I brushed it off at first, telling myself he was stressed. But then a message popped up on my phone, an anonymous note on Facebook Messenger. Your boyfriend's not who you think. It read with just enough detail about David's late nights to make my stomach twist. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Who sent this? A jealous coworker. A nosy neighbor, I didn't know. But doubt took root, gnawing at me. I started noticing things. David would step outside to take calls, his voice low, too quiet to hear. He'd leave his jacket on the couch, and once I found a receipt for a coffee shop we never went to. Dated for a night he claimed he was working. My mind raced. Piecing together moments I'd ignored, his quick excuses, the way he avoided my eyes when I asked about his day. I felt sick, like the ground was slipping beneath me. I'd given up everything for him, my family, my home, and now this. I needed answers, but part of me dreaded what I'd find. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. David came home late, his hair messy. A faint smell of perfume clinging to his shirt. I stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, my voice steady despite the shaking inside. Who are you with tonight? I asked. His eyes flickered, surprised, but he laughed it off. Just the guys from the shop, he said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. I pressed harder, mentioning the message, the receipt, the calls. His face hardened, his voice sharp. You're being paranoid, Sarah. I'm not doing anything. But his words felt hollow, his defensiveness a confession of its own. I didn't scream or cry. Something in me snapped, but it was quiet, resolute. I'm done, I said, my voice low. David stared, his mouth opening to argue, but I cut him off. I trusted you. I gave up everything for you. He reached for me, muttering excuses. But I stepped back. I couldn't stay in that apartment, surrounded by the life I thought we'd have. I grabbed my duffel bag, the same one I'd carried out of my parents' house, threw in my clothes, and walked out. David called after me, his voice fading as I shut the door. The street outside was quiet, the cold seeping through my jacket. I had nowhere to go, no plan. Just the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I'd lost my family and now David. I was alone again. That winter in Fargo was colder than any I'd ever known. After walking out on David, I was alone. My duffel bag slung over my shoulder, the weight of betrayal heavier than the clothes inside. I had no home, no family, no plan. The streets were slick with ice, wind howling as snow buried the sidewalks. I needed a place to stay, somewhere to rebuild. But my savings from the corner store were meager. I trudged through the storm, my breath fogging in the air, aiming for a cheap motel I'd heard about downtown. Each step felt heavier, the cold seeping into my bones, my mind racing with questions. Where would I go? How would I survive? The motel was farther than I thought. By the time I reached the bus depot on Main Avenue, the storm had worsened visibility down to nothing. The depot was a small, dimly lit shelter, its benches empty except for a couple of stranded travelers. My fingers numb. I sank onto a bench, the hum of the heater barely cutting through the chill. I only had enough money left to rent a motel room for a few days after paying for food and bus fare. My options were running out and panic crept in, sharp and unyielding. I'd left my parents' house, walked away from David, and now I was stuck with nowhere to turn. Desperate, I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed my parents' number. The screen's dim light flickering in the dark. Maybe they'd softened. Maybe they'd let me come home just for a night. Mom answered, her voice clipped. What do you want, Sarah? I swallowed, my throat tight. I'm stuck, Mom. It's bad out here. Can I? She cut me off. Don't come back here, you made your choice. Her words echoed the night they'd kicked me out, each syllable a fresh wound. I tried. Dad next, hoping he'd be kinder. Sarah. You heard your mother, he said, his tone flat. Don't call again. The call ended and I stared at the phone, the cold screen mocking me, feeling smaller than ever. The storm raged outside, snow piling against the depot's glass doors. I sank back onto the bench, my bag at my feet, the weight of their rejection crushing me. I'd lost David, my family, everything. The other travelers avoided my gaze, their own worries keeping them distant. I pulled my coat tighter, trying to hold myself together, but the loneliness was suffocating. I didn't know how long I sat there, minutes or hours. The storms roared, drowning out my thoughts. I was on the edge of giving up, wondering if I'd freeze out there if I tried to walk again. Then a voice broke through. "You okay, miss?" I looked up to see a man in a bus driver's uniform, his badge reading Gregory Lane. He was older, maybe in his 40s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. I shook my head, unable to speak. He glanced at the storm outside, then back at me. "You can't stay here all night. Depot closes soon." I mumbled something about not having anywhere to go, my voice barely audible. Gregory didn't pry. Instead, he grabbed his keys. "Come on," he said. "I'm done with my shift. I'll get you somewhere safe." I hesitated, wary. But his steady demeanor put me at ease. I followed him to his bus parked just outside the engine, still warm. The snow was relentless. But Gregory navigated the empty streets with care, driving me to a small inn on the edge of town. "They've got rooms, cheap ones," he said, looked at me and told me to stay calm and face everything. "Get yourself settled. You look like you need a break. We all do sometimes." I thanked him, my voice cracking, and stepped out into the storm. The inn's neon sign, a faint glow through the snow. Gregory's bus pulled away and I stood there, a flicker of hope cutting through the cold. After that night in the blizzard, I knew I had to start over, relying on no one but myself. The inn Gregory dropped me at was a lifeline, but it wasn't a home. I had a few hundred from my corner store job, barely enough for a week's rent. I needed a plan. A way to stand on my own after losing my family and David. The weight of those betrayals lingered, but I couldn't let it pull me under. I had to keep moving, prove I could survive without them. I reached out to Wendy Larson, my best friend from high school. Wendy was working as a receptionist at a dental office, scraping by, but always ready to help. I texted her from my phone, my fingers still shaky from the cold. "Sarah, where are you?" She replied, her worry clear even in text. I told her everything. My parents' rejection, David's betrayal, the storm. She didn't hesitate. "Come to my place," she texted back. "We'll figure it out." By the next day, I was at her apartment, a cozy one, bedroom filled with secondhand furniture. Wendy handed me a coffee and a wad of cash, maybe $200. "It's not much, but it's yours," she said. I tried to refuse, but she insisted, her eyes fierce. "You're not alone. Okay?" With Wendy's help, I found a studio apartment on the edge of Fargo, a cramped space with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The rent ate up most of my savings, so I kept my job at the corner store, picking up extra shifts to cover bills. The work was grueling, long hours, rude customers, but it kept me afloat. Wendy stopped by, often bringing takeout or dragging me to a diner when I looked too worn out. "You're tougher than you think," she'd say, her smile pulling me back from the edge. Her belief in me was a spark, something to hold on to when doubt crept in. I wanted more than just survival. I'd always been good with numbers, so I enrolled in an evening accounting course at a community college. The classes were tough, balancing work and study, but they gave me purpose. I'd sit in the library after class, poring over textbooks, imagining a future where I didn't have to count pennies. The instructor, a stern woman with a knack for explaining ledgers, noticed my effort. "You've got potential, Sarah," she said one night, handing back a graded quiz with a rare smile. Those words stuck with me, a reminder I could be more than my parents' disappointment or David's cast-off. Then Teresa texted me. A letter arrived at my apartment first, her handwriting neat on the envelope. "I'm sorry for how things went." She wrote, her words careful but sincere. She'd tucked $50 inside, saying it was from her savings, not Mom or Dad's. "You don't need them. You're stronger than you know." A week later, my phone buzzed with her number. "I want to help Sarah," she said, her voice soft. No strings. I thanked her, but kept my guard up. I wasn't ready to trust family again, not after Mom and Dad's words still echoed in my head. I used her money for groceries, but I didn't reply to her texts. I needed distance time to build something that was mine alone. Days turned into weeks, then months. I'd wake early, work my shift, attend class, and collapse into bed, exhausted but driven. Wendy was my rock, cheering me on when I doubted myself. One night, Over pizza at her place, she raised a glass of soda. "To you, Sarah," she said. "You're doing this." I smiled, a real one for the first time in months. I wasn't whole yet. The scars from my parents' rejection and David's betrayal ran deep. But I was moving forward. My apartment, my job, my classes, they were small victories. Proof I could rebuild without leaning on anyone who'd hurt me. I didn't know what lay ahead. But I was learning to trust myself one step at a time. 5 years later, I looked back at how far I'd come without needing them. I wasn't the broken girl who'd walked out of David's apartment, or sat shivering in that bus depot. I'd built a life, one I could be proud of. After finishing my accounting course, I landed a job at a big firm in Fargo, crunching numbers for corporate clients. My desk overlooked the city, a view that reminded me daily of what I'd overcome. I shared a cozy house with Ronald Cole, a high school history teacher I met at a coffee shop. Ronald was steady, kind, his laugh a balm to old wounds. We'd cook dinner together, plan weekend hikes, and talk about dreams that felt within reach. For the first time, I felt secure. Not just surviving, but thriving. My parents, Patricia and Harold, didn't fare as well. Teresa texted me one spring, her message, cautious but urgent. "Mom and Dad want to see you," she wrote. "They're sorry." I stared at my phone, the words stirring a mix of anger and indifference. Sorry after they'd thrown me out, told me never to come back. I remembered Mom's cold voice. Dad's flat dismissal in that blizzard. Teresa sent a letter next relaying their plea for a meeting, saying they missed me. I didn't reply. When she called, I kept it short. They made their choice. "Teresa," I said, my voice firm. "They don't get to undo it." I'd spent years rebuilding without them, and I wasn't about to let their guilt pull me back. They'd lost their daughter for good, left with only regret and an empty house. David's life unraveled too. I heard through Wendy that his dream of opening a garage had collapsed. He'd taken out loans, but the business tanked within a year. Bad decisions, worse luck. He was alone now, living in a run-down apartment. No family, no friends to lean on. Wendy said he'd asked about me once, his voice heavy with remorse, but I'd blocked his number long ago. He couldn't reach me, and I wanted it that way. His betrayal had cut deep, but it also pushed me to stand on my own. While I moved forward, David was stuck, haunted by what he'd thrown away. His regret was his own to carry, not mine to fix. Looking back, that blizzard night changed me forever. But I didn't regret walking away. I'd been a girl desperate for approval, clinging to a family who judged me, a boyfriend who lied. Leaving them was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But it set me free. Every step, stocking shelves, studying late, scraping by in that tiny apartment, built the woman I'd become. I learned to value myself, not the validation of people who'd never see my worth. Mom and Dad's rejection, David's betrayal. They were painful, but they taught me I didn't need them. I had Ronald, Wendy, and my own resilience. My life was proof that choosing myself was worth it no matter the cost. The biggest lesson I carried was this: protect your worth. Don't beg for love from people who can't give it. My parents chose pride over their daughter, and now they lived with silence. David chose fleeting distractions, and he ended up with nothing. I chose me, and I built a life I loved. Independence wasn't easy. It meant long nights, empty bank accounts, and moments of doubt. But it was better than clinging to a toxic family or a faithless partner. Walking away took courage, but it gave me strength I didn't know I had. To anyone listening, know this: you don't need to hold on to people who hurt you. Build your own path. Even if it's lonely at first, it's worth it. Thank you for staying with my story until the end. It means the world to share this journey with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? What lessons have you learned from walking away or standing up for yourself? Share them with me, with others. Your voice matters just like mine did when I chose to start over.